Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 7. We have made it to episode 7 right before the Christmas, everyone. Jerry Tavares here, and joining me today, as always, is Anthony Pinto. And today,
Hi.
hello, Tony. So today we're going to be talking about the last two skills when it comes to communication. In the previous podcast, we have been discussing the other five. If you want to know what they are, go back and hear the episodes out and get some info out of it. So today we're going to be talking about the last two, which is giving feedback and also receiving feedback, which can be very challenging for managers. So today we're going to give you some nice tools so that you can use at the workplace so that you can enhance your performance and your team's performance. So Tony, without further ado, just start us off with the first one, giving feedback.
Yeah. So putting it in context, Jerry, as you said, right? We said the key skills to be effective in communicating are drawn very much from the coaching practice, right?
Yeah.
And when we use those skills, we get really very effective in how we communicate with our team and how we communicate as a leader. And we said that the first three skills that we spoke about was all about building the right framework and the right environment for communicating effectively, which was basically listening, building rapport, and managing your emotions. Yeah. And then the last two episodes, we did one on grounding questions or asking exploratory questions. And the last episode we did was asking questions, get into the deeper meaning of what we're communicating when we're with our team.
Yeah.
Now, the last two then, of course, is giving feedback and receiving feedback. Now, while we say that the 7 skills are the key skills for communicating, they're not the end of it all, basically. We know that, there's a lot of skills that you need to build up because each of the 7 skills themselves has got about 10 to 15 sub-skills.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So communicating is a very special skill that needs deliberate practice, that needs learning, yeah, and that needs engaging. Yeah, and it doesn't happen overnight. And
No.
maybe that's one of the reasons why there's not enough real appreciation and training in communicating skills. And that's why communicating skills or lack of effective communicating skills has consistently been highlighted as one of the biggest challenges of organizations, of teams, of leaders, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what we're saying, yeah, so there is an important framework of skills, and we're talking only about the 7 very fundamental framework of skills, right? But I think it's very important for them to start the fundamentals and then get into the real specifics and build on those skills. As we said, I said in the first episode, we talked about 7 coaching skills, but in our coaching skills, right, we also got deeper skills and go up to about 26 or 30, 40 sub skills, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and this is I hope that whoever is listening doesn't get intimidated by the number, because when we hear such high numbers, this is not something that you sit down and you memorize from a book. This is something that you have to work through them and go through the experience so that you can internalize them. So don't get scared about that. We're going to keep it very meta, very basic here so that you can just get the proper skills and then develop them over time. So when Tony throws those crazy numbers, don't worry about it. You're gonna be all right. And before and before we keep going, another thing for you to think about is also that every time you go to a new organization or to a new team, the communication might be different. So the structure, the strategy, the way that they do it, it might be completely different than what you're used to. And you see it very often when there's a manager who is hands-on. This guy is taking everything on by his own. Oh, wow, I cannot even speak to that. I'm mixing my German and English at the same time in my head at lightning speed. So bear with me, people. But what happens is it happens so often that when the manager leaves to for another position, like every 4 years, big companies, the managers change. And then you have someone who was hands on, and then the next one comes in and is a delegator. People don't know what to do. And it's because the
Yeah.
communication in the workflow just completely changed. It's like pulling a rug under your feet, you know? So
Yeah.
so to be mindful of this stuff and what we're going to be sharing with you today, know that you can apply it in any situation as long as you are aware.
Yep. And yeah, one of the ways of developing or learning about these skills is go to some of the workshops that you, Jerry, are conducting out in Germany. And I do them in Malaysia, basically. Yeah.
I would say, if you're here in Germany, I would say go to Malaysia so you can take it as a work trip, you know, and go have dinner with Tony, you know. That's a highlight. Trust me.
Okay, so
Get serious. Let's
the
get serious.
feedback, two components of feedback, right?
Yes.
Giving feedback and receiving feedback, and definitely there are two different skills involved. Yeah. I'd like to start with a quote from D. Hock. D. Hock actually wrote a book called The Birth of the Chaotic Age. Chaotic as in chaos and order combined.
Mm-hmm.
And D. Hock is actually the founder of Visa International. And this is what it says: mistakes are toothless little things if you recognize and correct them. If you ignore or defend them, they grow fangs and bite. So what is feedback then, right? So feedback really is a special kind of information occurring after you make a response. Yeah. And so it's information that lets you know how well your response worked to achieve your goal, isn't it? So we all need good, accurate, and useful sensory-based and reflective feedback. And I'm saying those words very deliberately because there's so many different feedback that we get. It's not really sensory-based. So it's got to be sensory-based and reflective feedback that helps us in tuning up our skills and incorporating new response patterns. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and there are really 7 key components of high quality feedback. And the first one is basically sensory-based and behavioral. Now, what happens when we don't give sensory-based? What do you mean by sensory-based? What we can see, what we can hear, that's sensory-based, right? Because it's based on our senses. And we are giving feedback on behavior, what they say and what they do. So think about that now, yeah? What we can see and what we can hear, that's sensory-based. And what we can see in terms of what they do and what they say. So that's the first thing. How often do we give feedback and says, I know what you're thinking? So that's mind reading and that's not going to be very good feedback now.
No.
Yeah. And mind reading has been the biggest obstacle to effective feedback because we make assumptions on what people are meaning by what we observe in terms of behavior, but we don't talk about that behavior and we don't talk about what we see and what we hear. Well, we just give that from the mind read, yeah? So the first obstacle, first challenge is cut out the mind reading or stop the mind reading, yeah? And of course, the information that we give has got to be precise information,
yeah,
and in small steps. Now, if we say that, your work on the project is not altogether at the level we want, it's not going to help the person. Yeah, we must be very specific in terms of breaking all that information. When we say the work that you've done, what specifically are we talking about? Which part of the work? What kind of work were you doing, right? Which project are you talking about? All those must be very, very precise information. And at least small steps, they can bite-size, then you can, because if you say that, overall, it's not looking good at all, it's not going to be useful at all.
Yeah.
And what kind of feedback? Yeah.
And as you're saying that, I'm always thinking and reflecting on my clients and myself. So I want to give the audience here an example. So Tony and I started this podcast, and we create everything ourselves. So we edit the videos, we create the thumbnails, we're working on the thumbnails. And from my side, and I want to talk a little bit about personality and about communication preference. So the workshops that I do are about using the DISC model and the structogram and the MBTI, is to use this, with the colors. For people who don't know those names, it's like the different colors: red, yellow, blue, green. And is, instead of just looking at them as personalities, is looking at them as communication preferences. So here's the point that I'm trying to make here. So I, for example, I am a socializer. So I am the type of person that likes to talk to people, likes to communicate. I'm always excited about things, like the typical American, like, oh, look, a fly. Oh my God, it's amazing. And that has a negative effect, which is I have very low attention to detail. So I'm not too crazy about the details. I'm more about the big picture. And what I love about Tony and our collaboration is that Tony, although he has a lot of those qualities, he also has what I lack, which is the really fine attention to detail. So when there's a typo or a mistake or something is not in the frame correctly, then Tony is like, "Hey Jerry, this is not in frame. There's a typo here," and he corrects me right away. And this is where feedback comes in, and this is why I'm trying to make the point. Since we are different in the way that we communicate when we're giving feedback, right? It is important first that we establish trust. Where is this feedback coming from? Right? It's coming from love. It's coming from trying to help me be better and for us to produce the highest quality that we can for everybody. Right? So we are together in this. It's not about shaming. It's not about making people feel stupid. It's about working together and watching each other's back. So trust is so important before you even sit down with a person and give feedback. The second thing is that you have to think about the communication preferences. So if Tony is, for example, analytical, he's very, very careful with detail and things like that. I cannot show up and give Tony feedback the way that socialite people give feedback to one another, because Tony's not going to feel comfortable. He's going to be like, "What's going on here?" And this is a waste of my time. So I also have to adjust my communication, especially when I'm giving feedback to the person that is listening, so that they can have a low sense of stress and they don't go into that crocodile brain and be like, whoa, 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 and get defensive. So that's the first thing.
Yeah. Yep. That's a good point you made, Jerry, in the sense that the communication preferences, right? And the trust that we need to build. And we always say, meet them where they are and then take them where you want them to go. So if someone has got this, global perspective all the time, and we want to give them feedback, it's got to be very specific and very precise, right? We can't go straight into that. We got to take them from the global and then take them down to the specifics. Otherwise, they won't be able to connect with the specifics. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really good point. Yeah. The communication preference must be borne in mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, our clients are normally managers, right? Managers, and we also bring their teams as well, so that we can work and create that synergy within the team. But they're normally managers, the people that we coach. So, but managers also have bosses, right? So when you, the listener, when you go for your review and go meet with your boss, there's a little sense of nervousness there, right? And you're like, oh, what is he or she gonna say? I don't know. So we all feel that regardless of the position that we are in. So now think about this for a second. What if instead of having that nervousness, you will switch that to excitement, because you know that that person is going to take really good care of you and is going to help you achieve an even higher level in your career, right? That nervousness just gets turned into, oh my God, I cannot wait. I want to know how I can improve. And that's what we would like to create. That's what we focus on in doing this podcast and doing our workshops and just communicating with managers. We want to turn that nervousness into excitement, because that's what's going to motivate people in order to even create greater things.
Yeah. And that's, if we are, and we're going to talk about it afterwards, if we are receiving the feedback, then as you said, if you're going for a performance review, what's the intention and the state of mind that we want to hold before we go into that to receive the feedback, right?
Yeah.
But it also helps now for the manager to know what's the best way to give good quality feedback, right? And one of the key things also is it's timely, as immediate as possible. Now, we know that performance reviews have been, this now is the time that a lot of performance reviews are being done, right? A lot of organizations today are not really tied to the annual performance review, because it's found to be not very effective. I mean, you're talking about, an experience that happened 6 months ago, 3 months ago, and you talk about it today, the person receiving the feedback is not in the right frame of mind to receive it because his state is different already from the time that he first did the error or whatever he did that needed feedback, right? So I think a lot of organizations now are moving towards more timely feedback. Yeah, that is basically immediate, is of course the best, but at least as soon as possible. And one of the things is that because when you do it early enough, the frame of mind of the person receiving the feedback is more conducive to receiving it because he can relate to the experience.
Correct.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's 1-2 weeks later and says, "Did I do that? I don't remember."
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that timely very important. Yeah.
And also, when you do it periodically, let's say per quarter, or you do it more often, it takes less time. You don't need to spend 1 hour at the end of the year with this person. And it is a lot easier for you, one, to create a better relationship throughout the year with your team members. And two, you're able to steer them in the right direction because as a manager, you're supposed to manage, right? Manage emotions, manage expectations, manage their goals, and in the way that the direction where they're going. So it's a lot better to do that throughout the year than waiting until the end of the year and see if people hit their goals or not.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, really now people are moving towards weekly feedback almost. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is so important. Next one is the feedback has to be relevant to the outcome or at least outcome oriented. I mean, if we give feedback just, without the context, it's not going to sit well anyway. So the feedback must be, as we said, is to help the person receiving the feedback to tune their skills to a higher level. But tune your skills for what? Right? So it must be outcome focused or outcome oriented. Yeah. And as you said earlier, then the next important thing, the fifth component of giving high quality feedback is about having rapport, having trust with care and compassion and no judgment or evaluation.
Yeah, because feedback is a gift. You have to imagine that feedback is a gift. Criticism is not, but feedback is a gift because the person receiving the feedback can either take it or throw it away, right?
Yeah.
It's not a mandatory thing. So you have to see it. Okay, if I'm going to give Tony feedback, what gift can I give Tony? How am I going to help him become the person that he desires to be faster, or together with me? What kind of gift am I going to give him to help him? We're trying to help people, not shame people, and that's the differentiation we have to make.
Yeah, and of course the next one is very important. It's actionable. That gives the next step basically. Yeah, I mean, if you give a feedback and then the team member says, "So what do I do now?"
Yeah.
And they get lost completely. And when I give feedback, for me, I'm very, very focused on what's the next thing that needs to happen to make the change, basically. If you don't pin it down, then they're not going to change.
Yeah. And another thing also, that's one technique. And another technique that we have to also remind the listeners is that also that you can also take a coaching approach. So if the person doesn't know, like, okay, what should I do next? Well, Tony, let's explore that. So let's see where we have gone so far, and let's take a look and see how the future looks like. And let's come up with something together, because that increases buy-in opposed to you telling people what to do. I have a 3.5-year-old daughter. When I tell her what to do, 9 out of 10, she does not do it. It just happened this morning, right? So we have to negotiate and see what can we do, how can we do this, and they get buy-in. So I'm learning a lot. 3.5, yeah.
Well, I mean, you're exactly preempting number 7, right?
Yeah.
And we say make the feedback tentative. Tentative meaning create ownership, that they own it. Yeah. And then only can the feedback work. If like you said, if you just tell them and say, okay, get it done, then we're not showing that compassion and we're not helping them own the feedback. Yeah. And that's really key. So those are the 7 key steps of high quality feedback, or 7 components of high quality feedback. And of course, feedback also can include celebrating successes. Feedback is not always all about correcting mistakes.
No.
Yeah. So we must be mindful that, you know, we are also celebrating all the successes. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's giving feedback. Yeah. What's it?
Yeah, and Tony, before we move on to the next one, I wanna also mention about rapport, because when many managers who are more on the rational side and on the director side, the red side, they don't think is important to make that connection, to create that rapport. Is I tell you what to do and you should do it. It's black and white. So it is very important that you shift away from that mentality, because not everybody thinks the same as you. And going back to the communication preferences, you have to be aware of how the person likes to communicate, so that you don't activate that fear part of the brain.
Yeah, true. Yeah. Now, so then if that's the 7 components of feedback that managers and leaders needs to be practicing, and even team members amongst themselves, right? What
Yeah.
are the biggest threat to quality feedback? Yeah. And really it's you know, mind reading. The
Yeah.
biggest challenge to effective feedback is mind reading, where we kind of, you know, in our own perception, and we can never read another person's mind, and we'll always get it wrong. So when people tell me things based on mind reading, I always say it's 100% of the time you're going to get it wrong. But you say, no, I know this guy. I know how he behaves. I know how he thinks. Really? You know how he thinks? I always think that's funny when people say that to me, you know? I
Yeah.
know how he thinks.
Yeah.
That's number one, mind reading, yeah? And we actually do a lot of mind reading without realizing it.
We do. We jump the gun quite often.
Yeah. The second one is giving advice or advice giving. So you don't build ownership, as you said just now, right?
Yeah.
Telling them, right?
Yeah.
So that's another big challenge. Then you don't give feedback. You just tell them. Maybe just tell them, and they're not going to own it. Nothing will change in their behavior. Nothing will change in how they do things, basically. And of course, the third one is imposing our own evaluations. Yeah, which is saying that, you know, because evaluation is our own interpretation of what's happening. But we say that feedback has to be sensory based. Now, if you give them an evaluation, it's not going to connect to exactly what they said or did. You see what I mean? So sensory based means based on your observation of what you saw they do and what you heard them say, and then you can talk about the feedback, right? But if it's your own interpretation of what they said and what they did, it's not going to connect. That feedback is not going to connect at all. Yeah. So it's an imposed interpretation. And of course, on all of this is making a judgment. Yeah. If we start making judgments about their behavior, that's not going to be feedback either. Yeah. So when you look at that in the 7 components and what stops people from giving really good feedback, you can see that it's very, very clear that you just have to be very simple, very precise. Yeah. But with care and compassion and no judgment or evaluation, and give ownership to the receiver of the feedback, then things can change. If not, and of course, the thing is being very timely about it. Yeah. Not, as I said, we said annual performance reviews don't work very well.
No.
Yeah.
And they are still being done. That's the funny part. They're still being done. Yeah.
So that's all about giving feedback, right? Now, okay, that we say that now you've got the other skills also, right? We talked about, you know, listening fully, and then building the rapport and managing the emotions and the empathy when you give feedback, and compassion. And you can also use the, you know, other questions of grounding questions and deep questions, basically, in that conversation, right? As you give feedback, basically. Yeah.
And one way to get away from the mind reading is what you just touched right now, is when you're listening to the person and you see yourself trying to finish their thoughts or their sentences in your head, that means you are mind reading. So you want to step away from that by saying, instead of seeing what I can answer or how I can use that information to finish the sentences, how can I understand the person? You know, you want to listen to understand, where is this coming from, and you, since you are an NLP coach, Tony, what words are these people using so that you can see where they are coming from, where their mindset is at? Because the way that someone speaks to you tells a lot about the person, right?
Yeah.
And as well as what is in between the lines.
Yeah. So that's about giving feedback. Yeah. So then about receiving feedback.
Oh
What about
no, no, thank you. Yeah, receiving feedback from many people is not easy, especially in the managerial position. It is not easy.
Well, we say that receiving, you think giving feedback is a challenge. Receiving feedback is 10 times more challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tony, I was coaching a top manager. It was a while ago. It's not new. So yeah. And I was training this person because this person had to go on stage and lead a panel of really successful people internationally. And when I was coaching this person, I was just struck by how the person was speaking. So I leaned back and I said to this person, you know, I'm going to give you feedback because I love you. You talk too much. And he said, and he didn't say anything. And he sat back also, he leaned back and he looked at me like a tiger, furious, really furious. And he said to me, you know, Jerry, in my entire career, no one has ever said that to me. And I said, okay, this is the time where I'm shown the door and I'm out. So, but he took it so graciously. He sat there for a few seconds and he thought about it. And you could see the change that this person had right in that moment. He has such a huge change. And then when he went on and he did this this facilitation, people at the company came back to me and gave me feedback on his performance, and they said that it was something totally different on the positive side. So when you receive the feedback, even if it's not something that you would like to hear at the beginning, right? Especially because you're not going to hear it from your subordinates because you're so high up there and people will not tell you the truth because they're afraid.
Yeah.
It's not the culture that you want to create, but we'll talk more about that. But I just wanted to give you this example because even though I put myself out there by speaking to this person and saying that stuff, look at the positive change that we were able to create by being honest and providing feedback from the heart. You know?
Yeah, that's the key. Yeah. And we're going to talk about some of the key skills we need to receive feedback effectively, right?
Yeah.
But first, how do most people receive feedback? And we can identify like 5 different states that they get into. What's the first one? As you said, shock, right? I can't believe you are saying this, that feedback is completely off base. It is not right. It does not fit at all. How can anyone say that to me?
Yeah. Yeah.
First reaction, right?
Yeah.
Or they could get,
imagine if there had not been any rapport between him and I, right?
Yeah.
So, and even though I felt there was rapport, like the guy to this day, he loves me, right? But had there not been any rapport, maybe I would have been right and said, okay, the door is right there. I just got to leave right now. It's done. But since there was that rapport that we talked about earlier, he was able to move past the shock. And please, in the next one, Tony, continue.
Anger, right? You're trying to hurt me. That's threatening. I feel attacked. Response with being closed, withdrawn, annoyed, upset. So that's another way people can receive feedback. Another one, of course, rejection. That's wrong.
Yeah.
It responds with dismissing it, rationalizing it away, and rejecting, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Another one is acceptance, acknowledging the information and introspectively consider it, right? And of course, last one is humility.
Yeah.
Openly see the information as a gift and opportunity, as you said, and exploit it with a modest attitude of seeking to use it for growth. Yeah. So we have to make a choice. And especially when we go into, appointed feedback sessions, right? If you know your leader calls you in and says, we got to have a feedback session, then you got to go in with the idea that, okay, what's my intention for receiving feedback? I like to learn where I cannot see myself, where I'm not the best of who I can be.
Yeah.
So that's the first intention. I like to be able to improve, right? And learn from what somebody else can tell me, because I cannot see it myself. Yeah. As much as sometimes you look into the mirror and try and correct yourself, there's only so much you can see. Because otherwise, you'll never be able to see things that you can't see. Yeah. And even looking at the mirror, you can't see what's the back of your head anyway, as simple as that. But somebody else can see it. Yeah. So those are the, normal responses. The key one is acceptance and humility with the intention of growing with the feedback, basically. But yeah, you're right. Some people were just, what? How can you say that to me?
Yeah.
Or they'll walk out of the room,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And they just say,
or even if they don't say it, like when the person leans back, like you can see the emotions boiling in. It goes from shock to like anger to like, so you can even feel it.
Face color change.
You just have to wait. You just have to wait. Let it simmer. Because
yeah.
But as I said that example, we have to be conscious. We are paid to help people improve. That's what we're paid for, right, Tony? To help people improve and become a better version of themselves. When you are at work as a subordinate and you say this to your manager, this might come off differently if there's no rapport because of the hierarchy. So, of course, we're not saying, hey, go and say, hey, you talk too much, or that's not what we're trying to say. What we're trying to say is that there are different ways for you to give and receive feedback, but you need to build that trust and that rapport before you can move on, because the hierarchy can mess with that.
Yeah. I'm just reminded of a feedback that I received. I made a presentation to a client or prospective client. I think he was the director of HR, right? Multinational company. So I was giving him this presentation I've been given so many times to so many clients. And every time at the end of the presentation, when I asked my clients, so what was any specific thing in the presentation that, caught your eye? And I've always got very good feedback, very positive feedback on that presentation. But this time around, when I said, so what was it in my presentation that you found really interesting and caught your eye? And the answer I got, he said, overall, it's okay, but your presentation does not have enough oomph.
Okay.
Oomph meaning the wow factor, right?
Yeah,
There's no wow factor. I said, oh my God, how do you take feedback in a presentation like that live, right?
Yeah.
Now, my marketing partner sitting in the room, I saw his face just go red and like, how can he say that? We've got so many good feedback all the time, right?
Yeah.
Then I asked him, I said, so help me understand, what specifically made you say that it was not enough wow in there? And he said, it's just a feeling I have. It's not specific. I'm not sure, But I said, okay, thank you for the feedback, right? Now, what I did after that, and my partner, as we walked out of the room, my partner was still complaining and said, how can he say that? How can he say that? I said, hold on a minute. I said, let's think about it. I said, I will review all the slides and see where I can give that wow factor, that he wants to feel. And you know what? As I did review the whole thing, I found to add another slide that gave it that wow. And after that, when I use that slide every time, that was the wow factor.
There you go. There you go.
So you're willing to accept with humility, right? With humility that he has something, because we can only see it the way we see it. Other people will see it differently. It doesn't matter that, 10 other people before this one said it was a great presentation. I can, so useful and all of that. It doesn't matter that they said all that. One person says, hey, no wow factor. Think about it, work on it. Don't say, I don't care about this one person. 10 fellas told me it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As you're saying that, I'm thinking about myself. Um, and the question that we have to ask is, why are we asking for feedback? It is really important because, as you're saying that, there's some times where I have gotten feedback where it's not perfect. My training was not 5 stars, it was 4.8 or 4.5. And I get caught in the, what do you mean 4.5? Why not 5? But I am asking the question from a lack perspective, from like, what do you mean it was not good? Right?
Mm.
Instead of asking for genuine feedback, right? What I'm trying to say is that sometimes we ask for feedback just to hear how great we are. And it's important that before we're going to ask for feedback, to check in with ourselves and ask, am I asking for feedback just to hear how amazing I am? Or is it because I would like to use this to improve my craft?
Yep. Yep. Two qualities very key to accept or receiving feedback. If you're going to ask for feedback, you're going to receive feedback, right?
Yeah.
So two qualities very important is acceptance, acknowledging the feedback you're getting, introspectively considering it, and humility, openly seeing the information and as a gift and opportunity to grow. So
And
that intention has got to be set.
no
Yeah.
need to compensate for the negativity. So when the person told you about the wow factor, you didn't go into, oh well, yeah, we didn't have time, or we didn't think. You didn't come up with excuses. You said
No.
thank you so much for that honest feedback, and you went back to the drawing board to check it if it was true or not.
Yeah.
That's another thing that we have to be aware of, so that when an employee or someone gives us feedback, instead of us creating excuses, then we say, you know what, thank you very much, I'm going to think about that and I'm going to analyze that. That's
Yeah.
really
Yeah. And one of the key things about feedback is don't be defensive.
yeah.
Receiving feedback, I mean. Yeah. So what key skills are we talking about? Yeah. To effectively receive feedback, listening in an open way to the feedback while calm and interested.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got to put yourself in the right state of calm, right? Exploring in a curious and non-defensive way. Exploring that feedback in the curious and non-defensive way. The moment you start defending yourself from the feedback, you're not going to explore anything that can improve your. Yeah.
No.
And then, distinguishing whether it's evaluative or it's sensory based. If someone gives you feedback and you figure that it's really evaluative and not sensory based, then it's okay to start ask for clarifications. We as receiving the feedback, if the guy is making evaluations without any sensory based feedback, then we need to ask, okay, how can you help me understand what is the thing that I said or did that causes you to, have that evaluation? Because evaluation is not very useful for feedback, yeah?
Yeah.
And then you can ask for examples to ground the feedback. So sometimes we give a feedback without giving specific examples of the behavior, doesn't help also. Yeah.
Yeah.
So asking that clarity, and asking about positive emotions. So, that you also express positive emotions. So what were the positive things that I did that help in this, conversation basically? Yeah. If the feedback doesn't mention it at all. Accepting the words of the other person as their perception. I think we understand in all communicating, we only communicate from our perception of what we see and hear.
Yeah.
So whatever someone tells me in terms of giving me feedback, I know it's their perception. There's no fact and truth about it. It's a perception of what he saw and what he heard. So I have to be clear enough to be able to take it and ask for clarification and clarity and checking and testing if I need to get the feedback understood clearly well.
And also, one thing that we need to differentiate. So, when it comes to receiving feedback, it is extremely important that you separate. What do I mean by that? You have to separate yourself as a human being, as a person, as Jerry or as Tony, from Tony, the person that is doing this work, right? The feedback is about the work and the performance that you showed during the work, right?
Yeah.
So you have to differentiate yourself. So when someone is giving you feedback, they're not giving you feedback on the person, on who you are as a human being. They're giving you feedback on your performance. But since we're at work for so long, we tend to identify with what we do as if it's who we are. So it is very important not to get triggered by it, especially when we're getting feedback for improvement, not to mix it with yourself as a human being. We're talking about your performance and what you do at work, not who you are as a human being. Big differentiation.
Very, very key point, actually. This is really the identification of self, right?
Yeah.
Most people identify themselves by what they do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the biggest, what do you call, setback to your own best version of yourself, basically. Yeah. And so the other thing about skill about getting good receiving feedback is integrating what's usable in the feedback for your own personal development. Yeah. And so, the highest frame of all for receiving feedback, of course, is set an empowering intention. That my intention for asking for feedback or receiving feedback really is about how can I become the best version of myself.
Yeah.
Right. And that's really the part at the end of the day. Yeah. So you can see now giving feedback, receiving feedback, slightly different skills, but definitely, very, very powerful way of communicating to move to the next level. So as you can see now, fundamental basis of all communicating is setting the tone, setting the framework, listening actively, building rapport, and managing emotions.
Beautiful.
Now you set the ground. Now we can have a very effective conversation in terms of asking exploratory questions and deepening questions, right? And then, of course, talking about feedback and giving and receiving feedback today kind of tops it all up. Now you can see the whole package of skills that really is making communicating very effective, essentially. Yeah, we didn't go into the sub skills, but that can be do in trainings that we do basically in the detailed sub skills. Yeah. So that covers the whole, our intention of bringing this framework of communicating skills to the leaders and their teams, basically. Yeah. And what you talked about, when we receive feedback and we identify ourselves by what we do, I think that was a subject of a topic that we're going to talk in the future, this identification from self, because, as we said, end of the year, this is the time of the year when a lot of people are beating themselves up.
Yeah. Yeah, we should talk on the next episode. We should talk about the question, who am I becoming?
Yeah,
it's very important to touch that, because we don't want to be in that hamster wheel where we're just going to work without a sense of purpose, that why. And the why is not to make more money. The why is not to identify as a director, identify as a CEO. That shouldn't be the why. The why should be about who are you becoming as a human being throughout your trajectory in life. And we can discuss that and unpack that later on, because many people have that problem, especially when they get laid off, or they lose a job or whatever. They lose a sense of identification, especially the higher you go, the harder it is. So we can unpack that in the next episode. So to conclude it, I made a little notepad here, and I just wanted to hit a few points, which is, when it comes to feedback, first of all, what is the intention behind it? We talked about that feedback is a present, it's a gift. So how can we wrap it around as a gift so that we can help the person become who they want to become? The second one is to build that rapport, because it doesn't matter how great the gift is. If you don't have that relationship and that trust, it might be interpreted the wrong way, and it might create fear, or the person might feel attacked, as you mentioned before. And the last but not least is, when you're receiving feedback, learn to separate yourself. You are not that entity, or you're not your work. What your work is what you do. So learn to separate yourself and not get triggered by it, because they're not trying to go after your person. They're just trying to show you how you can improve a lot faster.
Yep. Great, Jerry. Thanks so much for this.
Good. All right. So have a beautiful time, everybody. And in the next episode, we're going to be talking about who are you becoming and who do you want to become in life. Have a beautiful weekend, and we'll see you on the next one.
Cheers. Bye-bye.